Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call our first workshop of the year together for Tuesday, April 2nd. This is a work session on the budget. And as we do every day and every meeting, we always start with worshiping God and our great country. And would like to have this morning if Jenny Marano from Baja Faith of Manatee would be leading our invocation today and leading our, yeah, you can get it right there. Yeah, sorry about that. Hagen, who served 24 years in the United States Air Force. He is retired. He received the Good Conduct Medal and Meritorious Service Medal and had various deployments in Germany and England. And everyone could please rise for the invocation and the pledge. Thank you.
A prayer for America. O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American democracy is worthy of thy favors and is deserving of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee through thy bounty and bestowal.
I don't see it.
Say the pledge.
There's nothing here.
Katie, can you help me?
Yes, sir. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance together, sir.
All right.
I pledge allegiance
I pledge allegiance
to the flag,
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic,
to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both. And sir, thank you for your service to our country. All right, moving along. Normally we take citizens' comment kind of early in most meetings, but in today we will take it at the end of the presentation, and the comments will be on agenda items only and items that were discussed here at the workshop. So, County Administrator, can you move us forward?
Yes, sir. Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Madam CFO Sheila McLean. Sheila?
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Interim County Attorney. Good morning, citizens of Manatee County. And good morning to my peers of Manatee County. Today, we will be discussing the financial and budget execution of Manatee County as it relates to where we ended our fiscal year of September 30th of 2023, because it was the end of our fiscal year end that just happened, and because we base most of our upcoming processes based on audited numbers that roll into our new processes, it's important that you understand where is Manatee County heading, where we ended before we even start the FY 2025 budget process that we are working on right now. In the topics of this discussion, I will be talking about the financial position, like I said, at fiscal year end of 2023. I will be talking about cash balances, changes in cash that has affected the reserves, and I will also be talking a little bit briefly about investments and liquidity ratios that give us a true status of where Manatee County financial health is as of a point in time. Also, moving forward into the fiscal year '24, because we know September is long and gone, now we want to know where are we at the closest time that we can kind of like pinpoint at the end of a full month of the fiscal year. So I brought it all the way up to February 29th of 2023. So I will be talking about where is our cash flow balances are today, as of that date, with reserves, and a little bit about bringing up our investments up to today. Also, we'll be talking about funding sources and major revenues. As we know, we have 7 big major funding sources that drive most of our budget. So I will also be talking about the condition of all these funding sources and projections as we see into the 5 years. We'll be talking about the status of projects as of September 30th. Performance and execution on the capital improvement plan is vital to identify and tell the citizens of Manatee County what is Manatee County and all of our departments, how are they performing in our capital projects. At the same time, it's very important that as we move forward on a new financial plan, we understand that there's multiple, other than reserves, our CIP has to take us to seek other opportunities of financing. So we will be bringing forward a debt financing plan that, along with our financial advisor, Public Prague, we have built in, and we're moving forward with the new CIP 25-29, although we are not ready to present those just yet until September when we start our budget meetings. We will be deliberating that, but this actually brings in the concept and the explanation of where are we heading in regards to capacity and sufficiency. Also, I will be giving a little bit brief recap on the millage. And finally, now that we build up the strong financial position of Manatee County, I want to talk about what is next. As we are working our FY25 budget process, I would like to establish the next steps and the timelines of the budget as we move forward into the presentations in June. The financial position of audited numbers as of September 30th of 2023 for Manatee County represents a cash balance of $1.8 billion. But of course, of that, we have some fiduciary obligations that I have to back out because those are already committed. They don't belong to us, and the grants as well, inclusive of the ARP. That money that we have received from grants in advance also are fully restricted and committed. So to get us to a cash balance adjusted of $1.689 billion. But what is important to understand is that on these dollars, we have already commitments that we have pledged, and we need to keep those commitments, right? So our available cash balance after commitments, inclusive of the CIP, and when I say inclusive of the CIP, it's only the year that we have adopted of the CIP, around $340 million. So with that said, then the only available cash balance that we have after commitments is $851 million. Pretty healthy for a county, but where does that take us? How did our budget perform for fiscal year 2023? $59.8 million is the money that we received in cash higher than what we estimated for 2023's budget. What does that say? A couple of things. One, that as conservative as Manatee County is, and we budget conservatively, we had a couple of factors that led us to the increased cash more than what we anticipated, and that would be one, it's ad valorem taxes. We received $6.2 million more than anticipated. We have 8 tax-supported funds, and it all blends in, and we will look at those in a second. The other one, if you do remember, in fiscal year, in May of 2023, we came to the board to talk about the American Rescue Plan. There was $52.6 million that we were in jeopardy of losing because they had not been already fully committed. So because ARP has a timeliness of spending, we kind of in conjunction and partner with EY and Ernst & Young, we analyzed it, and it was a true allowable use of funds to use government salaries to cover the number. What that did, it released the timeliness of dollars out of that dollar. So what we did in behalf, because now general fund got released $52.6 million from salaries they didn't cover, ARP did. So we pledged a special set aside in reserves of exactly that, $52.6 million, and the board created a list that is called the Generational Impact List. In that, there's 24 projects that have been itemized that really will be a generational impact to the community moving forward. Now let's talk about the ad valorem. The tax-supported funds. When it comes to the impacts in the tax-supported funds, the changes in available cash is reflected as this. An increase over than what we anticipated was $6.2 million. General fund resulting in this as $4.4 million increase. And you are going to ask yourselves, why did we get additional ad valorem? Because we already covered what the property appraiser had given us for our assessed values, and we have set a millage. Well, after we adopt, there is a reanalysis of what we call the post-VAV, is the Value Adjustment Board. It reassesses some of the property's values, and it came in higher. So we received more dollars, so that got realigned. Some tax-supported funds were impacted by efforts of reducing reserves through the participation of these funding sources into the capital improvement plan. One of the efforts that the board had told the community was that we would use our excess reserves to do more things with it, to enhance infrastructure. And at the same time, we have some projects in fiscal year 23 that came into finalized projects that came into operations in fiscal year 23. Hence, the library at Lakewood Ranch, the new library. Some intersections, parks and roads, some projects in Premier, all those are requiring now additional efforts on the operations side. Let's talk about investments and how does that affect our financial position immensely. First of all, it's fair to say that our investment policy regulates, in accordance with Florida Statute 218, the guidelines of what we do. It describes the parameters for investing our funds and identifies objectives, preferences, and tolerance of risk. So when I say tolerance of risk, and no municipality can invest in very risky investments. So also it provides constraints, and it also it provides an investment program and how to manage it and monitor it. The important takeaway of this is that the county, while maintaining solvency, cash on hand to pay daily obligations, the county leverages at low risk the pooled cash to seek financial returns at shorter terms. As of September 30th, our investment pool comprised of $1.8 billion. And as you can see also, everything that we have invested has had a good fair interest rates, yields, earning us revenues. Like in fiscal year 23, our total interest earnings was a total of $69 million. This is on all of our pulled cash dollars. And we ended the year with an average portfolio yield on our investments of 4.007, which is an increase from fiscal year 22 of 0.646. These investments are monitored by our investment consultant, Deep Blue Investments. And if you are interested in digging more and be updated on our investments, you can go on our mymanatee.org under county advisory boards, and it'll take you to the investment policy advisory board, and all the links to the reports and investment reports are in there on a monthly and quarterly basis. Now, let's talk about liquidity ratios. And liquidity ratios do matter. As a CFO, I can say that liquidity ratios are important. Important why? Investors and creditors use these kind of ratios to get informed decisions on the municipality's financial health. They can be used to determine that the county has enough cash on hand to pay its bills and to be able to exercise financing debt without hurting our current reserves. So when we talk about, there's many liquidity ratios that I can utilize, but I decided to use these two because those are the ones, first of all, that mainly we present in the ACFR, in the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, and those that make sense because our bond rating agencies, these are the ones that they look upon the most. And we'll be talking about what bond rating agencies really are taking into consideration when they're looking at the county's health. As of September 30th of 2023, and we break it into governmental and enterprise activities because it's the nature of the funding, of the revenues that come in and that identify how does it get categorized as governmental or enterprise. Enterprise are those that we operate through rates, like it is the utilities, and they provide a service to the community through the water supply. As of September 30th, our current unrestricted assets and liabilities in the governmental were 7.66 times. 7.66 times is the average ratio. To give you a little bit of a benchmark, an average current ratio should be at least between 1.2 to 2. We are at 7.66. The higher that you go on the ratio, it means that you have more, you can meet your obligations with your current assets more than by 7 times. So 7 times our current assets to meet our liabilities. And then on the enterprise side, we have 13.5 times. Now, keep in mind, the utility system has faced a growth, a challenge to meet growth. There's a lot of expansion projects that are taking flight in the CIP that are going to require this strong financial health to see these projects through and a strong debt financial plan as well, and I will be talking about this shortly. Talking about debt to equity ratio, to calculate, it's calculated, like I said, by rating agencies to measure the county's financial standing. This measures the risk, the credit worthiness, and the solvency. It is my job as CFO to be responsible to look into all these ratios, and to me, it's the lifeline because it can mean me making the recommendation to take difficult choices, whether the county expands, whether we pursue for more infrastructure, to do more new infrastructure, or we begin cutbacks. We are not there yet. Well, there, The debt to equity ratio for Manatee County right now is 0.23 as of September 30th. What does this mean? For a municipality, an ideal debt to equity ratio for governmental should be 0.4 or below. We are at 0.23, half of that. And that's where we continue. What does that tell you? That we are a very low debt municipality with a sound financial structure. Now, the final step is to look at our reserves. The reason why we're starting this presentation in the midst of beginning the FY25 process is two things. One, it's necessary for you as the decision makers to understand where Manatee County stands on their financial position so that you can actually make decisions on upcoming new spending that will rise from the fiscal year 25 process. So understanding the reserves, our cash, our investments paints the entire picture for the commission and administration. As of September 30th, our ending fiscal year 23 final budget for reserves was $539.9 million. When I discussed the cash flow on a couple of pages back, I had established that the available cash committed, after commitments, inclusive of CIP, was $851 million. And how does that relate, you're going to ask, with the reserves that I'm showing you right now? Every year, we have to realign to the budget the new changes after we have audited numbers. We have to realign the cash to our reserves. And that's the first step to the budget process. And that is what financial management does behind the scenes right now as we build into the budget for the new cycle. So this $859 million, so you're going to ask, what is the difference? So the difference is $311 million. And how is that going to come into the budget? But first, I got to explain to you what's the nature of this $311 million. So we had departments with a set budget. We had programs with a set budget, but departments will find efficiencies to be able to save dollars, or keep in mind, September 30th is just a point in time and operations don't cease to stop. So for departments, the transition from one fiscal year to another may have left some dollars behind that probably for continuation will continue to be spending into the new fiscal year. But those have to be realigned into the 24's budget. This $311 million, this spend down reduction was equivalent to the 7%. Also, we got revenues that came in higher than what we anticipated. As I showed you before, ad valorem came in $6.2 million than what we anticipated, but we had other revenue streams that came in higher than what we anticipated. And I will be talking about that shortly in regards to our major revenues. All that impact gave us an additional fund balance to be realigned of $311 million. So this is the time for the fiscal year 25 where I will bring this $311 million back into reserves, and these will become the beginning framework for the fiscal year 24 process. All this is being built back into the budget for continuation of programs, and at the board's advice and recommendation to increase some programs that may need, or the capital improvement plan that requires additional dollars. As we have seen, a lot of the projects that we currently have in the CIP have come in twice the estimated dollars and so forth. So this growth is helping us to continue the growth and the increase in the inflation that we are seeing in all these projects. Now, let's leave September 30th behind. Let's move a point in time to February 29th of 2024. Brings us closer into this fiscal year for fiscal year 24, and this is our cash. Our cash balance adjusted, like I said, we have fiduciary obligations and grants that we cannot account for. So we backed it out. As of February 29, the county has $2.1 billion in cash. Of that, keep in mind, there's $987 million of that 2.1 is already committed for CIP. There's $1.2 billion committed to others. Okay, our total commitment for fiscal year 24 is $586 million of that 2.1. Remember when I talked about our debt to equity ratio? So can we meet our debt with our debt payments with our current reserves? Sure. Our debt ratio comes at 0.26 as of February 29th. It has increased from September by 0.3, but keep in mind, in November of 2023, fiscal year 24, we bonded. We had 2 bond issuances, which brought the ratio a little bit higher. Still maneuvering through a very healthy financial structure, and this continues to keep our county moving as we move into the fiscal year 25 process. Okay, and so where are our reserves as well? Okay. Let's talk about realignment again. It's still the factor, because that's in 24. That these reserves that you are seeing as of February, $621 million. We still have to realign these $311 million. So when we bring in June the budget, all these monies will be fully realigned. If you look at the star, General Fund as the chief operating fund for $100 million of reserves, which if you looked at before, we had 56, so now it kind of like recovered a little bit more. Now, let's keep in mind one thing. The financial position of Manatee County continues to stay strong. It's maintaining stable reserves to keep up with growth and its requirements of expansion of infrastructure, which is what this capital improvement plan is attempting to do. Increased cost due to inflation is also very necessary, that these reserves are kept in a very healthy status. The board has committed themselves to to align all of our needs for growth and all of the expansion needs. So this is where we are heading. So this is, now, how do we align our reserves? So $620 million plus the $311 million will realign reserves to $931 million. We talked about cash of $2.1 billion. And so we back out the 900 in reserves to cash. And I'm just doing this to show you that the commitments that we have in the budget for fiscal year 24 align with the $1.2 billion that I presented back in September. That is our net budget. Now, as of our investments as of February 29th, going along with our cash, it's $2.3 billion. We keep in cash what we consider to be our daily need for obligations. The surplus gets invested back into different investment tools. Anything from commercial paper, from pool dollars into other categories, but nothing that can be anything beyond 5 years and low risk. Our weighted average interest yields on all these investments are 5.4%, which is very good for investing at the rate that we can sustain, right? Because we cannot do risky investments to seek more yield, higher yields. At the level that we have to keep it, 5.4% yield weighted average is very good, and it's giving us a higher earnings on our dollars. Now, to recap on the fiscal year adopted budget, we remember that our gross total budget was $2.9 billion, but of that is already, that's accounting our reserves. So to say to the community, what is really the money that I have pledged for the budget for services and all the levels of services in all the programs that we provide to the county, it's $1.2 billion. That's your net of everything, because the difference between one and the other is just our reserves and our internal overhead and processes that we have to provide funding for internally. Keep in mind that department budgets were $537 million, and we had an investment into the fiscal year 24's budget of $322 million. Debt service payments are being paid at $52 million, inclusive of governmental and enterprise. We have pledged into this budget $239 million to fund the constitutional officers and the judicial programs. And we have pledged another 67 for other programs such as healthcare, community redevelopment agencies. The port's budget is in here as well. Now, let's talk about the major revenues. And why is this important? Of the expected total revenues to be received for fiscal year 24, 52% comes from all these 7 funding. There you go. Thank you, Claudia. 52% of all the budget from all the revenues expected in fiscal year 24 comes from all these 7 funding sources. And we will be talking about it because it's important to understand how did they perform in 23 and how are they performing today and how are we projecting that it will perform towards the end of fiscal year 24. Again, building the base for the fiscal year 24 that's coming in process. The total revenue for fiscal year 24 that we have received is $1.2 billion. Of that, ad valorem revenues is 35% of the total of these revenues, 35%. Of course, Manatee County has been very conservative. You're going to see projections that are a little bit lower from what we have seen historically in last year and the previous year. But keep in mind that the economy and how the inflation and the unknowns and the volatility of right now the market and the housing market, we don't know what is to come. Financial advisors all over the world are trying to identify the exact time and point when this shift is going to change, whether it's going to be a recession, whether it's going to be not as bad, or is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be a year from now or whatever? We don't know. But Manatee County keeps the conservative outcome because I'd rather a CFO come to you and tell you that I anticipated less revenues and I didn't overcommit the county, and then we didn't get as many revenues and now we have to cut back. So that is my job to present to the board, estimates that really make more sense based on what the economy is telling you, based on what we see. So let's talk about ad valorem revenues, and also commonly known as property taxes. As we know, this is a function of your assessed values times your millage. At this current time, our millage is 6.2326, and our unincorporated, for those that live in unincorporated side of Manatee County, also a .6109 is levied into the property taxes. Those that live in the city, they have their own millages in addition to the ones that are the countywide millage. For fiscal year '23, we received a total of $340 million in property taxes. And normally, the rate that we receive revenues is around 96, 97%. And you can see that over the historical life of this revenue source. And what does that tell me is that, okay, why do we receive 96% and not 100? The reason why is two things. We have, it's commonly known that we have some properties that may be in foreclosure that are not paying their property taxes on their timeliness. Also, if you are a citizen with a property and you pay your taxes in November, you get a 4% discount. If you pay in December, you get 3% discount, which is great for the citizens, but it is money that the county does not receive. Now, let's move into the discussion of the property tax, of the infrastructure sales tax as the second largest revenue stream that we have. This one represents 4% of the total of the 52%, right? And as you can see, for fiscal year '23, we received $42.3 million, which was an increase from last year of 13%. For '24, we have been monitoring this funding source, and I'm going to step back for a second and explain what the infrastructure sales tax dollars really is, okay? Back in 2016, we chose to levy a penny. It was voted by referendum by the voters of Manatee County, and we got a half-cent sales discretionary surtax. It's discretionary because we choose to levy it, okay? And the citizens of Manatee County chose to give us that additional funding source to be able to do certain infrastructure improvements throughout the county, from sidewalks to road improvements, to parks, for safer neighborhoods, et cetera. This surtax is a 15-year funding source, and we are already into 8 years remaining of this tax, and it has been by far from where we anticipated a really a higher increase in dollars than what we had estimated. Originally, we said when we presented this IST that it was going to give us approximately 4% every year, but it has not been that. As you can see, year after year, we have received 8%, 15%, 17%, 13% beyond what we expect and beyond what the previous year has brought us. So it is a very healthy funding source. And to give you a little bit of a tidbit of how important the IST is for the county, at the end of the 15-year mark of the IST, we would have received a total of $645 million of revenues that we have been able to utilize to do projects for the county. Let's move on to the tourist development tax. Currently, Manatee County levies a 5 pennies for tourist development tax. On March of 2024, and this is a really good news for the county, on March of 2024, the Department of Revenue certified Manatee County to be a high-impact tourism county. And what does that mean? It means that now we can collect an additional 6 penny for more to cover more tourism cost. But not only that, we are pledging these dollars to enhance parks and enhance more infrastructure for the citizens of Manatee County, which is an allowable use for, from tourist development tax dollars. As you can see, for 2023, we collected $30.1 million, which was 8.52 million, 8% more than what the 2022 was. Now, in 2024, as conservatively, like I established, we are monitoring into 5 months of the year, we are monitoring this revenue. And we're seeing that this revenue has not quite picked up as other years have. And this is basically a seasonal revenue. And when I say seasonal, it's because when there's more tourists in town, there's more tourist tax to be had. So during the summer is the heaviest. Spring break, summer, Christmas time is the heaviest when we collect the more dollars. So I try to thread lightly because we don't know what is that going to look like. We hope that it's going to continue to be the same, but we thread lightly with the incoming 6 penny, the estimates, and then of course give granted. We're not going to start levying this until it's fully approved by ordinance and all that by the board and the Tourist Development Council. So when that happens, because the Department of Revenue already certified it, we will be coming. We will start levying hopefully by July. So it's only going to be the last 2-3 months of the fiscal year. So then 33% is what we are calculating for 2024. It's going to be the increase from last year at $41.2 million. Now let's talk about the next funding source, is sales tax. Currently, we levy 7% of sales tax, and this is based on the zip codes that live in Manatee County, and those are certified every year by our Inspector General. And from this revenue source, it is fully based on, again, like I said, in zip code, and of course, and we get a little bit of a allocation every quarter that is kind of like a true-up for monies that were not recovered during the current month or not accounted for at that time when we received the collection for the month. For 2023, we received $42 million of this revenue, which was 10.52% higher than the previous year. A very strong funding source and consistent funding source that we have. And we anticipate conservatively this year for 24 to be an increase of 6.55%. Now, let's move into the state revenue sharing. And you're going to ask yourself, well, what is that? So, state revenue sharing actually is a percent of sales tax that the revenue collects, their portion, not our portion, it's their portion of the cigarette tax, of the alcohol tax. We get a percentage, 2%, around 2%. And then all that gets distributed back. How does that get distributed is based on population. Of course, we have to meet certain requirements of programs that the county has to provide in order to be able to get this, and we have to report that every year. But it is another stable funding source that the general fund receives. And in 2023, we received $16.6 million. It's an increase of 8.26% from last year, from 22. But another thing that is very important that you understand, all these funding sources that are none except that go into the general fund, except the IST and the tourist development tax, are funding sources that we can utilize to pledge to pay for debt service as another diversified funding tool to pay for debt service. So because we cannot pledge ad valorem taxes to pay debt service, payments for bonds and such. Now let's moving about on gas taxes. Gas taxes and impact fees are the last of those of the tools that are going to be talking about, and these ones do matter to the capital improvement plan. They're only meant to be used. Gas taxes are only meant to be used for transportation needs. We collect 12 pennies, 12 cents of it. It's our maximum that you can allow as are allowed as a county. We collect every single one of them. Right? We have a lot of needs, as you can see throughout the county, not only on road improvements, for maintenance of roads, for repaving of roads, for bridges maintenance, sidewalks improvements, and so forth. So gas taxes is one of those funding sources that you can use for any of those. Of course, municipalities receive a portion of these funds as well, based on their population and based on what they report to FDOT of their efforts of capital projects on the transportation side as well are being. Right? For 2023, we received $26.6 million, which is 6.39% more than what we received in 2022. This funding source actually has a determined fate, and that's what I call it, because the legislation is moving towards energy efficiency and more green efforts and so forth. We do not know what is the fate of this funding source. So what that tells me is that as a CFO, we need to estimate and project this funding source very carefully into the outer years. And also, as I know this and what the economy is doing, we need to tread lightly on the use of this. It is in my plan to not pledge these dollars for debt payments, which is an eligible funding source to use for paying debt, but I'm choosing not to, because we are maintaining this funding source to pledge for maintenance of the transportation system. Talking about the impact fees. So these impact fees, and I am combining all the impact fees that we receive: transportation, all 4 zones, parks, public safety, law enforcement, and libraries impact fees. All those are combined in here. Okay, they all don't move in the same direction, and it's all, of course, impacted by the growth of the county.
Go ahead. I'll talk.
2023 brought for the county $57 million, which is 21% more revenues than what we received in 2022. Now, our projections, and you will see, because this affects the outcomes of the projects that are in the CIP, as there's a lot of growth in the county and a lot of projects that are requiring impact fee dollars into it. And increased cost has shown that impact fees has been pledging a lot of the resources into these capital projects that are in the CIP. For 2024, we are anticipating an 18% increase with a $67 million projection into the end of the fiscal year. That's an increase of $10 million from the previous fiscal year. Commissioner, you had a question? You good? Okay. So we move into the next section, which is the status of the projects in the capital improvement plan. First, we talk about revenues. Now it's important that we blend in the cost and expense that our strong and robust CIP is bringing. But to paint the entire picture, it's my duty to tell the board, how is the CIP performing in regards to execution? How are we moving down the line all of our projects from design all the way to completion? Okay. As a tidbit, and before I get into this slide that you see, the total projects that fiscal year 23 was working on was a total of 589 projects, of which performance for an entire fiscal year is important that you understand. This shows a testament that the county is working hard on projects all over the county, even considering these factors that you are seeing here in the screen, because the capital improvement plan is not a one-size-fits-all. Projects are facing challenges right now, and when I put the number one, it's because the number one factors that are affecting all the projects across the board. There are factors that only affect road projects, factors that only affect utility projects, but these ones that are stated as number one, increase in inflation, inaccurate estimates, availability of workforce. We're competing with other counties for the same companies that are building our roads, that are building our sidewalks, that are doing our parks, that are, so it is just not. It takes time to put us like in the line of doing these projects, and some of them even conflict. And we don't even we can put a project out there and a project doesn't get any bids because they don't have enough manpower. There's not enough manpower going out there in the market for all the counties to use that are using the same developers, the same construction companies. So it is a struggle. And also the cost of equipment and the availability of materials and so forth. We have been waiting for chillers for over a year. That is just the economy that we have been working, and it's because we're competing. Everybody's buying chillers, and chillers cannot be made in 2 months. It takes 11 months, 12 months to build the chiller and to get it to the place that we need it. So these are the factors that all these departments that are doing the capital improvement plan are faced with. Now let's talk about transportation and how transportation has performed in the fiscal year. And I choose a full fiscal year of performance because when we start a fiscal year showing you, there's new projects that have been brought forward. So it's going to show all bottlenecked into the zero started if I show you this report as of December or as of November, or even as of January, because during the holidays, CIP stalls a little bit. So let's talk about transportation. Towards the end of fiscal year 23, there was a total of 126 active projects in different categories such as intersections, renewal and replacement of roads, road improvement, sidewalks, etc. A total investment of $556 million was placed in 2023 for continuation of projects. But how did they perform in the cycle of a project? As you can see, 44% was in the design phase, which is 56 projects of these 126 were in the design stage. Moving into construction, you can see that 25 of them already moved from design to the construction stage for a total percentage in construction of 56%. And as this GIS, it may be small, but GIS mapping is showing that it's all over the county. We have diversified all of our projects all throughout the county. Now let's talk about stormwater, which goes hand in hand with the transportation, since transportation is the one that works. In fiscal year 23, there was 26 projects. Keep in mind, execution rate stormwater may be a little bit slower than other areas. As projects, as projects in 23 were sort of kind of new, and the funding source, existing funding source that we're utilizing has forced us to lower the efforts and keep them in a standstill mode now until we find other funding sources, such as the Southwest TIF. There's projects that are being work done in the Southwest TIF that are improving the stormwater areas. And then also there is ARP, generational impact dollars coming in '24 that are funding a lot of these initiatives in '23 and in the upcoming '24. For total investment of $52.6 million for stormwater, the projects are moving. 60% are still in design. Like I said, these ones don't move as fast as other areas in the projects. And 35% are already in construction. This CIP is bringing into parks, for fiscal year '23, brought into parks a lot of new projects into the pipeline. Jump Marble, the Lincoln Park Pool, Premier projects, GT Bray enhancements, and so forth. Those that are moving quite nicely. There was a total of 91 projects in all of the areas, from beach and waterways to boat ramps to parks and aquatics to athletic fields to environmental preserves to recreation and so forth. 23 of those projects are in the design stage. 68 of them are in the construction phase, which speaks very good about how are all these departments flowing their projects from one cycle to the other without skipping a beat. Even taking into consideration all these factors, negative factors that we have discussed, that I have discussed before. A total investment in '23 was $156 million. This is just the active projects that have received funding as of fiscal year '23. Of course, there is more to come in the '24-28 and in the '25-29 that will be brought forward in the upcoming budget process. Now, let's talk about libraries, public safety, and law enforcement for fiscal year '23. We had a total of 15. As we know, the county just finished a library at Lakewood Ranch, fully completed in September. So that actually was that one that you see there as completed. 9 of the total 15 projects is in construction, and 6 of them are in design. Again, moving towards the cycles as it's supposed to. That's really what you want to see. These projects are flowing from design to completion all the way to entering into full operational status. A total investment of $55.8 million. Now let's move into other general government projects. In fiscal year '23, these projects are projects such as technology projects, doing IT projects like the fiber loops around the county, building and renovations, and then law enforcement buildings, such as the property evidence building and so forth. EMS stations, the EMS stations are in public safety. For a total appropriations of $102 million. And then let's finally get to utilities and solid waste. The total projects of utilities was 195 projects that were active as of fiscal year '23. 104 of those are already in construction phase, in 30%, 60%, 90%. And then the other 91 are in the design phase. Again, showing dedication to moving all these projects towards completion in a very safe manner. And when I say safe, good way, and it shows accountability, because if we have more projects in construction than in design, it means that You know, is there going to be, the question, is there going to be enough resources to finish all these projects that are coming into construction in the pipeline? Instead, they're choosing to move them down the line, you know, at a very steady pace all the way to completion. $522.9 million of efforts. Now, in the 24 to 28 CIP, we showed, and I will show that in a little bit, is that utilities, to make sure that they are keeping up with growth of the county, they are bringing forward expansion projects that are going to require a very robust financing and funding strategies. Now, what I'm showing in here, again, is our GIS mapping. This one represents all the utility and solid waste projects. They're all over the county. Well, not the solid waste, but the utilities are all over the county. The growth and the expansion has taken us in every direction around all over the county. Now, if you are interested in seeing this GIS mapping of plotted projects, you can go into the mymanatee.org. Inside financial management and within the capital improvement plan, there's the map of projects, and it'll take you, it's very interactive. You can find the project that you are looking for. You can type it, you can search it by category, and even you can click on the project report. It'll take you to the project report explaining the status, explaining the financing methods, and explaining the program in itself. I mean, is there more funding to be coming? Is this project is fully funded? And so forth. Now, again, to recap, and I said I would do this just to keep it fresh in our minds, that as we're talking about revenues, there's also the expense side of things. You know, all the efforts, these dollars are going to be the continuation of our CIP plan, of our operational plan into the FY25 budget process. So on the capital improvement side for fiscal year 24, we had a total investment in 24 of $2.1 billion, with an investment in 24 of projects of $385 million. It is important to say that 639 projects are right now in motion or are initiating the motion to start for fiscal year 25. Okay. Now, with that said, I said that I would bring the impact fees and the gas tax to explain to you how is that built up into the CIP model that we have currently in the 24-28 projects built into 25-29. Keep in mind, these are not the new projects that are coming in the 25-29. When I roll them, this represents what's in 24-28 with the realignment of what the reserves that I just explained are looking into, to know that this is the money that's left over in our reserves to move forward into 25-29 with the increased cost as we are seeing today. Okay, for the impact fees, this one I'm going to separate it individually to talk about transportation, all of them separately, because it's important to understand. For example, transportation has different zones. It has 4 zones that are being affected by growth in different ways. Right, some of them are moving faster, some of them are moving slower, and it's because growth is not the same on each one of those zones. Some of them are higher growth than others. On the northeast and the southeast of Manatee County, the growth is larger only because Manatee County is expanding out into the parish areas, into the Lakewood Range areas, and so forth. So as you can see, on the top part of it, you can see the fund balances of each one of these zones. broken down by all the years as we go. This has the projections of our impact fees into the years, as well as the beginning balance that we started and we had reassessed. When I say reassessed, is reassessed with the fund reserves that I just discussed, and as well, bringing in all the budget amendments that we have brought in fiscal year 24 from October to February 29. Okay. Just a tidbit of information, since October to February, we have increased into the CIP $39.9 million additional resources for projects that either have been brought new or have had an increase in cost brought forward. Let's talk about projections, because that's what you see in those squares over here. And projections is a very important thing into the capital improvement plan. Why? Because we do a 5-year plan, right? And we are committed to the citizens to show that our fund balances and our reserves are ample to not only cover this year, but all the 5 years into the future. In some of them, we even do 10 years into the future, because what's healthy today may not be what's healthy into the future. So we have that responsibility to our citizens to show them that the money works today and it works tomorrow. Okay, so right now we do our projections as of 2029. 2024 and 2025 shows very increased estimates, because that's what we anticipate as financial management that is going to happen with the economy and what our financial advisor is recommending based on what he sees out there in the market. We tread lightly as conservative as Manatee County is. So after 25, you can see some of these zones are going, the revenue projections are going a little bit lower, back to levels of 2021 and 2022. Because like I said, I'd like to be conservative and estimate something that we can meet without overstepping our obligations, and then come to you and saying we have to cut back, right? You want to be the one that says we have more resources, we can tackle inflation and all these increased costs that we have. So as you can see, in 2023, for the Northeast Transportation District, we collected $16 million. For fiscal year 24, I'm projecting a little bit lower at 11.9. And then in fiscal year 25, I am projecting, and into the outer years, a little bit of more increase. Why? Because this area over here, we know that it is growing. It's growing exponentially. And over the next 5 years, it's going to continue to grow. So this one is one of those that have kind of like been the exception a little bit in our projections, because of what we see and what we know it's happening into the future. With the Northwest Transportation District, the same thing. We have kept it kind of like consistent. Now let's talk about the Southeast and the Southwest. Southeast, I had mentioned, is also one of the fastest growing zones in the area of Manatee County. So our estimates into the outer years still shows very healthy revenues coming in. This is our opportunity in these 5 years of revenues that are coming in because of growth. We're taking the opportunity and the advantage of closing in the gap on all these projects in the CIP that we have started, all the big sixes, Fort Hamer, 44th, Moccasin Wallow, all these projects, Lorraine Road, Upper Manatee River Road, Rye Road, and so forth, that we can take advantage of this growth in the county. Now, with impact fees, parks, and libraries, there's a different story. There is, right? Growth has not caught up as fast with them as with the others, and also because parks has become also a growing category where we are investing more in parks and recreation for the leisure of the citizens of Manatee County. And not only that, we are also enticing other areas to come to Manatee County in sense of events and so forth. So for libraries, we know that we just have in the CIP one project. After we had finished the Parks Library, we have the Rocky Bluff expansion. That's the one that's in the CIP for 23. Started 23, coming in full blown into 24. For our revenues, I'm still showing healthy revenues into the parks, but we gotta tread lightly because if you look at your ending balance for 25, and this is all cumulative, right? So if we spend the $6 million in 25, that's going to impact on the outer years, the potential to fund other projects into the outer years, right? So we monitor in every single budget amendment, all these years' flow changes constantly. So this is a very live feed. We've already adjusted all of our budget amendments as of February, end of February. So what you're seeing is really what is going to be the framework for our CIP 2529. For the impact fees for law enforcement and public safety, likewise, you can see that over the fiscal years of the CIP, we have a strong ending balances. Again, as much as we are utilizing public safety with the new EMS stations out into the east side and west side of the Manatee County, expanding out and putting new EMS stations and so forth, already are accounted for in this program. So as you can see also, if there is an increase in inflation, we are ready to tackle those with our balances. Now let's talk about gas taxes. Gas taxes is one of those that I mentioned that we would tread lightly, right? With the full 12 pennies utilizing for transportation, we're utilizing a large portion for maintenance, for reef surfacing, for bridge maintenance, and so forth. So those are out, the monies that are left over get pulled into the CIP. Right, so as you can see, still our ending balances for the gas taxes are still remaining strong. What do we choose as administration and the commission to use these dollars is at your discretion. The only one thing that I'm going to advise is not to use it for debt service payments because we don't know the fate of this funding source. So we want to just kind of like keep lightly instead of pledging gas taxes on bond issuances that are 30 years out into the future. Now, Chairman, do you want to take a break or anything like that? Usually it's like. Okay. All right. So as we talk about capital improvement, we talk about how much we're pledging and how much inflation has caught up with us. It's important that we understand a couple of things. The debt financing plan is a vital portion of your capital improvement, right? Because it tells us that not only are we going to use our resources, we're evaluating to use our resources, but we're also evaluating the timeliness of these projects and the capacity that we can bring in to finish these projects to get them to the finish line, right? Projects such as 44 that had required large influx of dollars have been included in this debt financing plan. Upper Manatee River Road with increases that of $100 million, with utility expansion projects that are over $200 million. The this is very important. That so breaking it down, this is really how I structure our debt funding plan, and this is how I sit down with our financial advisor to go and start identifying all the categories and all the phases towards completion of a debt funding plan. And at the end of when I present our June budget, this would be a done plan. I will bring to you a full-blown debt funding plan based on the projects and the needs that are arise with this new upcoming budget. Okay, I safe to we have to say that make that distinction of governmental versus utilities, because the funding source that's going to pay for this debt service is the one that drives how we bond and the requirements of bonding and the length of bonding and the timing of bonding. It's essential that we know these categories. CBNA means covenant to budget and appropriate. It means that we are pledging non-ad valorem revenues in our general revenue stream. Okay, we cannot pledge property taxes to pay debt. We cannot pledge property taxes to put it even in the financing plan. Okay, property taxes are set for levels of services provided to the community as a whole. So now that I explained both our categories, then the second thing, and this it applies for the both of them, this is first we need to identify the capital needs, the capital improvement needs into the CIP. How many projects? Our financial advisor just sat with us for 2 hours to talk about the projects that are in the upcoming CIP and the projects that we had and how does that morphed from last year to this year. We talked about the timing of the projects, the length, the commitment, where are these projects going to be in design, how fast are they going to be moving, how can we break those projects into one phase or two phases so that we can mitigate the impact of the cost of these projects into different potential issuances. And then also is debt service payments. I mean, how much are we willing to pledge into debt service payments? Because once we bond, it's 30 years of commitment, right? Does the funds, so we have to look at the capacity for each one of these funding services that, funding sources that we're gonna pledge these dollars to into the outer years to see if it kind of like aligns with our plan. For utilities, we have a different methodology, right? So we do identify the financing capital needs, and we also identify how much can we go on debt service payments, but we also have to factor in the fact that the rates have to be adjusted. Are the current rates sufficient to build all this expansion into the plan, or do we need to reassess? Okay. There's also, we have to provide a bond feasibility report and an engineer's report that says, you know, this is going to work based on the projects, their standings, where they are, the capacity, and into the outer years, because they also do their own 10-year projections to see if the utility is, again, taking into consideration that how much impact in our bond rating do we want to take? Right? And we will be talking about this when it comes to sufficiency, okay? Very important, understanding where we are today, current outstanding debt, second followed by debt capacity. How much can we afford based on our reserves that we currently have? And then third is debt sufficiency. How much, now that we know, yes, I have capacity in my fund, but how much do I want to stretch to do these projects? Stretching meaning, one, stretch could potentially damage our bond rating, right? And when I say damage, it means lowers it. And it hinders our capacity for future bonding. For the upcoming years, are we closing that door on us? So that is where the explanation of debt sufficiency is going to come. I'm also going to be talking about economic economic market. Where are we at? What are we seeing? What is the financial advisor seeing? And at the same time, what are the bond ratings taking into consideration when we are absorbing so much debt or not, right? To give us the agencies. These rating agencies are monitoring us quarterly. And when we have Fitch and Moody's, they both do. So quarterly, they come back and say, let's look at your outcome. Let's look at your position at this moment. And fortunately, we have been showing very positive results, and they're about to release a new press release in the upcoming month, a couple of weeks, sorry, with our new results. So these ones are going to be very positive as well. You want me to? Yes, sir.
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
With us passing on those credit card processing fees, have we seen a significant increase on the revenue side of things by collecting those fees?
Great question. So we knew that it was after we had implemented this policy of passing on the user fees to the customers, it was going to take a process because we had previous contracts that we had to reevaluate and bring in a new method of passing on the user fees. And also, for some others, they were already in transition with new vendors to change into. So like utilities, for example, they just moved into Paymentus, but their contract was effective October 1st. So I knew it was going to take approximately like 6 to 7 months before we started, but in the fiscal year 24, we adjusted for those. We're still seeing that a couple, like the impact fees, because we were not able to secure a full contract with ACI until December. We still lagged a couple of months. We were kind of like eating the merchant fees. But everybody has taken their step. All the contracts have been already moved forward, and they're all in place to pass on the user fees. Utilities, building, development services, the parks as well. The only ones that, as per our policy establishes that we are, in the event that there is no cost efficiency to the change to passing the user fee, then we could approve staying with the status quo. That was utilized in the libraries until we can find a way for that methodology to be passed on without such a large cost. And because they don't incur in a lot of merchant fees. It's not cost efficient, so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I anticipated that these savings will be approximately $4 million to the county.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about, like I said, my last row, that outstanding, understanding what we have now, right, will help us and to understand what the capacity that we can reach further out. So remembering that in 2022 and in 2023, we had 3 new bond issuances already that increased our outstanding balance. Right now, we have an outstanding debt balance of $864 million. Before 2022, we tread very, very lightly, but also we have very large reserves, right? The commission said they were going to do more infrastructure and finish seeing projects that were, meeting with the growth of the county and so forth. So the only way to do this enhancement to the CIP was to utilize debt. Okay, one of those bond issuances was the GEO bonds. Those have their own environmental lands millage, so that's already has a unique funding stream. We don't worry about that. But, and I technically don't worry about any other ones because we were able to secure very low interest rates. The one in 2022, we've secured at, at 4.39%. And no, that was the 2023. The 2022 at 3.49%. And not only that, we were able to secure premiums on each one of these issuances. Like in the 2022 for 23, we secured $21 million in addition to what we bonded. Because what this tells you is that investors see Manatee County as a very healthy municipality, and they want to invest in our bonds, right? And they're willing to give us more dollars for a little piece of a higher yield, and it was very minimal. And then with that, we were able to do approximately an additional 14 projects already. And then on the utility side, we were able to secure at 3.92%, bringing in premiums of $11.7 million. So as you can see, we have been able to not only secure the first part of our CIP of 24-28 with these bond issuances, but also we have managed to diversify the fundings that are utilized to pay for this debt service. We have currently 19 different funding sources allowable and eligible use to pay for these debt service funds, which that says that general fund is not absorbing the impact of all these payments of debt service. Okay? So currently we have debt service payments of $35.2 million in the governmental, because in total we have $52 million of debt service payments. But on the governmental side, we have 35.2, which I have to build that into the budget to look at debt capacity. And that's when we move into to give a little bit of recapping, and I'm stepping back, is to show our debt plan that we just proposed for the FY24-28 CIP, right? So we said that on the governmental side, we were going to bring in, to cover the projects from 24 and 25, a governmental bond issuance of $155 million. That was already done. And we got $21 million more than that $155 million, which is taking us to two things. One, to forward fund some of the other projects that are in the outer years, and to keep up with the increased cost of the projects that we currently have. Okay? For this upcoming plan, we have a bonding for the general government of $83 million. And when I say we have a plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be bonding. It's just that we're watching our reserves to see how we can make that balance between pay as you go, using the reserves, versus bonding and the amount of bonding and the timeliness of the bonding. So this is all like a, people will call shell game. You know, this is where do I want to be? And this goes along the lines of debt capacity and debt sufficiency. And I cannot stress that enough, because that is my job and our financial advisor's job, is to make sure that it is a very healthy and sound plan for the full 5 years of the CIP, right? On the utility side, we have a plan for bonding of, the ones that are circling red are the upcoming bondings that we haven't done. In the enterprise side, we have $126.6 million of bonding that is coming. Now, this one will be in the upcoming summer. We are watching right now the market, as the market is moving, because We do not, we are thinking, and I will talk about that, is that the market is going to lower its rates in May. If that doesn't happen, then that's why we stretch it out into June. So our financial advisor and we have been looking into the market like weekly to see where we standing on that. Should we move it? Should we move it to June? Should we wait till July? That's where the window of opportunity is going to fit in our utilities. Is it going to be then now, which financing tool are we going to utilize? Are we going to do a bank note, a bank loan, a line of credit, or fully blown bond issuance? Okay, and it all depends on timing. Timing, because for utilities, it takes over like 5 months to build in a full comprehensive plan that we can provide to get us to the line. We have to estimate rates, we have to do a bond engineer's report, we have to do an engineer's report. All that has to be placed inside the bond documents so that the bonds know the strength and the capacity of the system in itself. And then,
Madam CFO,
yes, sir.
can we go ahead and take a 10-minute break before we get into bond capacity conversation?
Yes.
Because I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So let's take
Well, it is to me.
let's take a 10-minute break to 10:40 and come back at that time. So we'll recess for 10 minutes.
in the future, are there other projects, oh, there, it's on now all of a sudden, okay. Are there other projects that are lying in waiting, and are there other considerations for revenue streams that will be weakened in the future? Could you give us a little glance at that future?
Of course, and that's a very good question. So right now, we're building into the CAP projects that are like to address growth, right? That are absolutely needed at this point. However, we have a list of projects of record where projects that are really significant also for the county are waiting to be brought into the CAP phases for the Fort Hamer Bridge. The new Fort Hamer Bridge are also awaiting to be coming into the CAP, where right now we are just not at the capacity where we can do it. So as we move out into these projects and complete those that the board has said they were going to complete, we will utilize, continue utilizing our resources to bring in all those projects as well. Now, when it comes to certain funding sources that are used to pledge for capital improvement, like it is impact fees, like it is gas taxes. We don't know the fate of gas taxes, so that's why I mentioned that we are not attempting to utilize pledging gas taxes for debt service into the outer years, because we just don't know where is that gonna lay. But also impact fees, as we look into how, yes, growth right now is happening at an exponential rate for the county. But what is that going to look like in 2 to 3 years? So we're conservatively approaching slowly that avenue and seeing what the future is going to bring into it. And then, of course, I know that the commission, once they know they've gotten to a point where we have addressed growth, will either realign some of their strategies to either reduce millage or any other things. But keep in mind, a lot of these projects are also bringing a lot of operational cost attached to them as well. So once they come out of the CIP, they're going to need a lot of influx of operational costs as well.
Madam CFO, real quick, regarding our bond capacity, at what point do you feel comfortable to reach our ceiling to where it will not affect our bond ratings? As far as, you got to have a ceiling out there that you feel that we're going to hit at some point to where we're not going to do any more bonding. And then we'll have to look for other funding sources at that time. Do you see that time coming soon, or do you see it out in the future before we're impacted?
So my answer is going to be, at this point, we are assessing reserves. So first of all, it's as far as our reserves can go without jeopardizing our healthy status. And that one, I'm looking at all these ratios that you are looking above, right? I do not want to reach a debt to equity ratio of 0.4 by no means, by no means. So when I feel like I'm reaching that target, no more, right? My advice will be, here, board, we need to kind of like realign or so more, right? Then the other thing is that, okay, I like our 20% reserves to meet, to have, right? And I have expressed this, is that every single funding source that we have, we try to keep a 20% in reserves for to meet at least 60%, 60 days of operational cost. Leave those behind in case of. We are a coastal community, and storm events can hit that could potentially damage the health of our county, all right? So I will always attempt to keep that 20%. Once that 20% is jeopardized, that will be the cap that I will come to you also and say. Also, I know the factors that the bond rating agencies are looking, and the general fund's health as the chief operating fund is one of the main factors that they are looking upon. Every time they do a monitoring, I have general fund is the first question that I have to explain on where are they standing in their financial position. So all these factors that I continuously are looking will say, and I cannot say today because I'm still evaluating all of the budget, but I will come in my debt financing plan, I will tell you this is our ceiling. Are we there yet? No, but I can tell you that I see the red light coming, like a couple of miles away. So I'm kind of like placing a little bit of a halt. Let's finish what we started, all these big six projects, before we can say let's take a different strategy. But that's just my advice as CFO.
So you mentioned the big six. Is Fort Hamer Bridge included in that or not, in your mind? So we've got a lot of money moving on that. I mean, and we've talked to federal people and state people to get involved on that. So just my input is we need to make the numbers work to where we can get that project done. It's very important to the county and to our citizens. Thank you.
There are certain steps that the county has taken to start that. There's different connectors that we have to get in place to before we can even think about a bridge. Because if we do a bridge, we have to expand all the roadways that are attached to that. And I believe that those connectors from Fort Hamer to Moccasin Wallow, to Upper Manatee River Road, all those are being expanded as we speak to be able to give birth to the new bridge that's coming for Fort Hamer. And that is the next effort that is in the pipeline coming in a couple of years.
Right. But we can't stop priming the pump on that, I would say. I mean, I don't know if you're the person to, if it should be to the other commissioners or whatever, but we got to keep it moving.
I'm just a money lady. Show me the money. All right. Any questions, Chairman? Any more? Good. Okay. So let's talk about debt capacity. And debt capacity means what is the plan that we are going to do based on what we are looking into our budget and realigning our budget reserves and our cash flows and our solvency and looking at our liquidity ratios. Then I can say, okay, what is our capacity? Okay. What are our options to meet capital needs? Do we use more of our reserves, pay as we go? Or do we go for a very robust debt financing plan? Like I said, when our debt to equity ratio reaches a certain cap, then I will come to you. And our financial advisor will also say you need to pump the brakes. And we need to start looking at other alternatives. Luckily, our reserves are at a point where we can continue building a balance between debt and reserves, and use our reserves to complete our capital improvement plan as it is right now. Okay, so our financial advisor provided us this analysis of debt capacity, and it just shows you really it's built upon where we are today, our current debt outstanding. We have right now $451 million in debt. This is on the governmental side, because on the utility side, it's all based on the engineer's report, and it's based on a different kind of structured analysis, and we are working that right now. And we have current annual debt service of 35.3, okay? how much capacity do we want to add as we see the CIP that it is currently now, and knowing what I know on the CIP that's coming, what is going to be required. So when you look at this chart over here, it shows you beyond the $35 million, how much are we comfortable to add into debt service payments. And keep in mind, all of these debt service payments can be diversified, and it's all about timing. It's all about timing of the projects. Remember, I had discussed this, okay? For the governmental side, then let's just say that we want to get an additional $296 million. $296 million. Keep in mind that in the CIP, we have the parking garage project that is in the upcoming CIP and other upcoming other parking garages that are going to need that influx. Granted, we are seeking other opportunities of public-private partnerships, but as it is, the county has to pledge some dollars to be able to move forward with design and to see it through. Okay, so are we willing? So if we're willing, based on, and when I say willing, I mean our reserves can accommodate for bonding to take us to a $547 million outstanding with $40 million of annual debt service. So if we bonded an additional $40 million, okay, if we bonded an additional $96.6 million, which is what, if you looked at the debt plan for 24 through 28, I had a future bond issuance of $84 million. This one probably at this point with new estimates may be very close to the 96. So if we bonded an additional $96 million, it will be an additional increase to our debt service of 4.7. This is what I'm going to take to build into a budget to see how much capacity can we go. And in June, I will tell you, I will come and I will tell you, let's bond, we could bond this much dollars, and it's not my decision, it's the decision of the board of how much they want to forward fund projects. I know there is some significant projects in the parks, in transportation, and in the law enforcement side of the of the CIP. So just for an example, if we wanted to, let's just say that our capacity for the general revenues, we could pay another $4.7 million. Okay, that would give us another $96.6 million we could bond. Now, if our capacity on our reserves would allow us to pay another $14 million, that will take us to $50 million worth of debt service payments, we could bond $296 million more for capital projects. Keep in mind, every time that you bond, because our bond rating is so good and so strong, the premium capacity is there, right? So we could add additional premiums, and this is going low because as you can see, when we bonded $151 million, we got $21 million of premium in this last bond issuance in November. So that potential is there. That could get us faster to put some projects in motion, even fast forward fund some of the projects that are in the outer years, or even tackle the severe increases in project costs that we are seeing. So forth and so forth. So, there's a couple of scenarios that our financial advisor, Prague, gave us so we can work it in our reserves to see this is how much we can go for in the reserves without hurting our capacity. When I say our capacity is keeping our 20% and then also being able to meet all of our obligations, all of our commitments, and all of our CIP infrastructure needs. Okay, so where do we want to go? This is a chart more for the budget process in itself that's going to help me build into the CIP this structure. And then when I come in June, and I'll tell you, this is what this kind of bonding will do for the budget, and then you will decide debt sufficiency. So how much is enough? Okay, so I will tell you, based on my plan and based on the model that our financial advisor gave us, and based on what we know, right? We are doing projects such as the LED lighting. We're doing Light Up Manatee. We're doing a lot of other initiatives that are being built into the budget right now. So all that is a well-planned, thought-of budget with capacity built in, right? So then at that point, I will say, okay, our need for CIP is $286 million on the governmental side, okay? That will increase $296 million, okay? We can increase our debt service annual by $14 million. And I have diversified that $14 million in this way. Impact fees can pay for debt service. General fund can pay for debt service. No gas taxes involved in this here, even though they are an allowable funding source for debt service, but I have exercised what my comments before. And in that way, build to you a very robust debt plan, debt financing plan.
Quick question, Madam CFO. When you're looking at the CIP and what we need to put into it, you and Evan sit down, you're banging out these numbers, and are we building any like cost plus into that on top of the CIP number to cover for potential inflation, cost increases, things like that? So when you come to us and say, hey, we can do another 296 million, increase it to here or whatever, is that already going to include those type of numbers in there that are going to cover us in case we had, because at some point your bonding, like you say, is going to stop. So are we going to build those type of numbers into that CIP budget? You're never going to say, okay, this project's XYZ, it'll be finished here, inflation might do this, let's build in an extra 10% on top of that as a cost plus. So is that, and then you'll come to us and say, hey, look, this is what we need, but it'll include those numbers, protection on the backside.
In the funny that you say that, in the 2022 bonds, we increased, knowing what inflation is doing to us, we increased all the projects by 45%. Utilities increases all their projects by 35, 50% the first 2 years and 35 in the subsequent years. So we are putting that impact into it as well, so that we are not, taken off guard. We are planning that accordingly, and we plan to do that in this debt financing plan as well. Very good question. So when we talk about debt sufficiency, okay, there you go again with the debt coverage ratio with limits and ceilings, okay? It's important to address that the federal government does have a ceiling, but Florida law, that's right. Yeah, but Florida law doesn't establish a debt limit. It does not impose a debt limit. Instead, it is left up to the local governments to determine and include in their debt management policy. Florida Statute 132, Section 23.5. So it's a self-imposed limits. If you look at our budget book on page 368, there is our debt policy. It's 4 factors that we have to calculate in order to determine our limits. So that is part of our budget process, as well as the calculation of all these limits. what is a good limit to have? What is a good limit that the bond rating agencies like to see? Okay? And that goes along the calculation of our debt coverage. And that's what you see on this side over here of the slide. On the general government side, the annual comprehensive financial report every year calculates our debt coverage, okay? And coverage is, are we meeting with our own revenues and reserves, our operations, and our debt, okay? For utilities, bond rating agencies like to see a 2 points in coverage, okay? The normal is 1.15, okay? So all these ratios and calculations of debt coverage also give us a benchmark. Are we meeting our debt policy? And are we meeting our bond rating agencies, not required, but what they like to see? Okay, for general government, we have 4.72 times. So we can meet with our revenues and our reserves 4.7 times our debt. Okay, very great, very good thing to have, because that means that we can stretch a little bit without getting into the. So if we decide as the county, as the commission, you want to reduce a little bit of that debt coverage to be able to do a lot of the CIP and bond more, we still have capacity. We still have sufficiency, okay? And when I say sufficiency, is how much risk and how much does the county want to stretch seeing our debt coverage ratios go down. Utilities this year, in 2023, reduced their debt coverage a little bit. If you notice, in 2022, they had 4.19. In 23, they ended up with a 3.23. Okay, still very healthy for a utility system, right? Every time we have presentations with all the bond rating agencies, Fitch and Moody's, we have to give a full-blown presentation of where all of our reserves are, where utilities are we meeting all these factors that the rating agencies are seeking. And that takes us to the second part of our debt sufficiency, is the bond ratings.
Commissioner Beard.
Go back to the last slide. If we, would you feel comfortable if we were to double that number today, that 4.72? If the debt coverage was doubled, would you feel comfortable today?
No, there's
No.
such a thing as a balance, okay? Meaning too much debt coverage ratio, it means probably it may be seen as you are not addressing your infrastructure accordingly, right? You see all these projects in the CIP and we're not addressing timing, right? Expansion and growth doesn't wait, right? We have projects that require, in utilities, for example, they are requiring over $400 million of inflow to meet growth. So that's timing, right? But timing, we can be phased out as well. So when we calculate these debt coverages, the clerk's office does monthly interim statements, and the debt ratio is calculated in there. I don't feel comfortable doubling it. I think we are in a very safe place.
What number do you
Right.
feel comfortable at?
So I don't want, again, I feel comfortable with not saying the bond rating agencies that my debt coverage is close to 1.15, right? So I would prefer to have double that. So at least a 2.5, right? And utilities is still above that as well. Like I said, bond rating agencies like to see 2. 2 is it's a healthy, very healthy financial structure. And that's where I want to place I want to not place myself. I'd like to keep it where we can have and be proud to say that we are very financially healthy. But that doesn't mean that if we go down 1, we are not healthy, because we are double the times in our coverage.
So you're saying that's the max debt that we can take on right now, currently?
Well, I'm saying that the debt coverage will address how far can we go.
What's the max debt that we can take on as a county currently today? That you feel comfortable with?
Well, that's depending on the budget and the obligations. So that's what I'm saying is that when I'm building into the budget, I can bring you a debt financing plan that I can. When I brought you the adopted 2024, when I brought you this one, I could say that we could meet this obligation at bonding approximately $700,000 for utilities based on the rate structure that utilities has built. And for governmental, we bonded almost $300 million. I felt safe saying this is where we are. And we still kept coverage up above 4.7, right? So what does that tell you? $300 million keeping at 4.72. But again, we have built new programs into the budget. So if I tell you today that $400 million of bonding is how much I would like it to be, the scenarios are different this year because we have new programs. We have Light of Manatee. We have the new libraries. We have, certain things.
I do want a bridge.
Commissioner Bearden, you good? Commissioner Satcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at this number on the government side, 4.72, I guess I'll ask it as a hypothetical. Hypothetically, if today we took out $100 million extra bonds, if there was some way to do that in a day, that changes that number to what?
I will have to go back and recalculate it all because not only do I have to bring my operations to current standing, I have to bring also my revenues and then calculate that.
Or another way of asking the question might be, you said you're comfortable at 2.3, right? 1.15 times 2, you want to be twice. So if you're comfortable at 2.3, if you take 4.72 and subtract 2.3, what is that amount? Do we know?
Okay, so if we already,
How many
built in
tens of millions
$300
is that?
million in the governmental side for debt capacity, right? So this will give you a good benchmark, right? This is my debt financing plan today, okay? So if I'm saying that we can afford $300 million of debt, right, for the CIP 24-28, right? Then
That's
and
additional?
I have 4.72. I think it will take us probably to 4. But again, it's just maintaining everything else constant.
So the 300 that you just mentioned, that's additional. 300 additional debt would take you to around 4. Is that correct? It would decrease your number, your coverage number to 4.
Approximately. I'm not giving you
Yes, ma'am.
a strict number, but I'm giving you an approximate. And I'm also basing it because utilities, from the 4.9 they had in 22 to the 2023, they went down a notch. And they bonded, they bonded $203 million.
All right, so if I understand the numbers correctly, in theory, I think we could have my bridge and still be 3 times your 1.15. That's all I'll have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Made a point. All right, so when we talk about bond ratings, I have to first say that we have a really AAA rating for the governmental. For utilities, we have, so it's kind of like a mix. We have a very high solvency credit rating coming from Moody's and a AAA coming from Fitch. Okay, these are just like phenomenal bond ratings that to have as a municipality. Okay, but what does the bond rating agencies are looking when they rate, the factors they are looking at when they rate us? Okay, for Moody's, They say the factors that can cause a downgrade, one is substantial additional debt. Okay, I've always asked them what's substantial to you, right? So then they have this, very convoluted formula that they utilize, to do the anti-dilution test and also forth. So they do that every single time that we go for bonding, every single time. And then the other one is erosion of financial position, lowering our reserves. And when I say this, they're looking at very carefully at general fund, not every single 145 funds that we have. General fund is the one target every single time. For Fitch ratings, is sustained increase in long-term liability to a level above the 10% of personal income. Okay. I'm working with a financial advisor because he determines that 10% of personal income every single time. And if you can see in the ACFR, there is statistics that shows what our 10% personal income is. But then the second one, which is something that, when I keep the general fund always very close and to look, because Fitch says that sustained decline in general fund reserves due to budgetary imbalances on any other funding sources is a factor for reducing our bond rating. So that's why when I come to you and say general fund, although it's a unrestricted, very unrestricted, the only unrestricted funding source, it still has to keep a balance of reserves well enough that the bond rating agencies don't come back with a lowering of our ratings. So let us talk about the economics. An economic update on the economic outlook of our municipal bond markets. It reflects growth is slowing down, and this is put out there. The labor market remains resilient. Inflation is up to 3.2% from the 3.1% from the prior month. Cuts are likely to occur. Market participants are betting that the rate cuts will begin in June of 2024. And Fed officials expect 3 cuts this year. Again, utilities is the next one that we are looking to bond. As we know, it takes a couple of months to get the process moving from the moment we come to the board, all the way to bonding, finalizing the bonding. So we are right now in the process of building up into coming to the board for a move forward with bonding for utilities. Whether we're going to do it through a bond loan or a bond issuance, it is still yet being looked at because of the timing of the projects. IRS requires that for bonding the projects, they have to be within 3 years, at least 80% complete. Some of these projects we know that can take up to, 2 to 3 years to be completed. So the phasing of some of these projects, especially in the utility side, is going to be vital for these upcoming bond issuances. As of March of 2024, our muni bonds have yielded at 3.07 for the first year, 2.48 for 5 years, 2.47 for 10 years, and as you can see, 3.65 for 30 years. So it is even lower than what we just bonded in the last 3 bond issuances. So this is the time that we need to, start thinking about what the strategy is going to be for bonding. Okay. This economic update was given by our financial advisor, Public Resources Advisors Group. Does that name?
Madam
Yes.
CFO.
Yes.
In that update, obviously, they're much more savvy than me. But the inflationary numbers have to be driven by credit card debt. We have $1.3 trillion worth of credit card debt. We have $1.1 trillion worth of car debt. Car loans are being paid slow right now. We've got a storm brewing. So it seems to me the inflation still rising is not necessarily real because it's spent on credit cards. So we're seeing a big falter here. Is that taken into consideration? I assume it is, because if they're assuming rates are going to come back down again, all of these factors are going to hit us. Is it discussed, credit card debt?
So this one right now is kind of like, it's not the overall economy. This one peels in everything else and puts into factor the municipal bond market in itself. So, and because of that, because there's other factors in the economy that shifts, that are shifting, the actual outlook into the economy right now is looking at muni bonds,
Okay.
to see what they are doing. So of course, I cannot finish my presentation to talk about our adopted millage that we currently have. Our current millage, and as we know, we have broken down our county-wide operating millage is total of 6.2326. And the general fund has the highest of the millages. But we do a lot. For the last 2 years, we have reduced our millage. Commissioners have opted to lower the millage in 2022 by 0.2, in 2023 by 0.3. In fiscal year 24, there was no change in millage. Going along with, let's complete all the projects that, with the resources and utilizing the growth increases to take us over the finish line of this CIP. But what is the fate of our millage is going to depend ultimately on my presentation that I will be bringing in June. As I said, there's a lot of new programs that the county is bringing forward that could, that will decide the strategy that the commission wants to place. Now, I have spoken about 24, I have spoken about 23. Let's talk about 25 and the budget process. What is our next step? Okay. Right now, we are building a comprehensive strategic budget. The commission, the administrator is recommending funding to be more aligned with the board strategies, right? So the board has their own required goals. So then it's the trickle-down effect. Departments are coming to the administrator to make sure that we have all synced with the board's direction and strategies and goals. And then once all those needs are aligned, financial management can finalize funding options, debt financing options, and present finally a comprehensive budget to the board, which is going to be second week of June. As it relates to the capital improvement plan, this is, what financial management calls the DFL review plan, is that when we evaluate all these CIP projects coming in, we ask the departments, can this be doable in, when I say it doesn't there's no conflicts with other projects, with FDOT, with any other agency that are doing the projects in the areas or in the districts. Second, it's our job that as you bring these needs, we try to identify the funding capacities and the financing capacities for it. So if a project cannot be funded, then it needs to be strategized in a different way. And then, of course, logistically sound. Logistically sound means that it could be done in that year, that there are the parameters, that all these factors that I talked about align to be able to do this project in the year that they're wanting to do the project. Or If they're bringing 15 projects in the same fiscal year, do you even have the manpower to do all these projects in the year you're trying to bring in these projects? And then finally, and I promise this is the end, what are the timelines for the fiscal year 25? Okay, right now I'm presenting to you the financial position as we stand right now of Manatee County. For you to be able to have that sense of transparency and comfort that whatever you're about to approve in the fiscal year 25 process, you can create your own strategies and approve and accept the recommendations that the administrator is going to bring to you. On May 6th, financial management has to provide a final draft of the budget. This is our goal, to provide the final draft of the budget and the capital improvement plan to our administrator for his review. After all the meetings and all the, burning the midnight oil meetings and work efforts. So then that takes you board to June. Before the recess on June 12, we present to you, the board, for the first time in the morning. Then in the afternoon, then we start discussing departments' budgets and programs' budgets. Every director will come to you and they will support their requests. You will discuss with them whatever programs, questions you may have, all the way till July 17. On July 17, we will do the first part of the constitutional officers and the decision unit review second part of the department's budgets and programs budgets. Okay. Moving to June 18, we bring to you an entire day of capital improvement plan, and then we'll talk about the funding summaries. So now I brought you all these expenses, all this budget, but then how does that work for all the independent funding sources that I have in the budget, committing to this budget, all their resources? Okay. On June 19, understanding that the public utility system is so large, we have separated that discussion to a half a day of only utilities. Okay. In the afternoon, we will, if needed, we will have the second portion of the review of the funding sources, if needed. And then on August the 1st, I will come back to you. During these June meetings, the departments will defend items that were not funded, that kept them funded. And if the board chooses to fund any of these items, we have a process that's called the pooling. We put those in a list. It has to be one commissioner wants it, the second one a partner has to second it in order to make it into the list. On August the 1st, we will come to you with the resolution of all these changes into the budget. And at that point, you have to set the approval of the tentative millage. At that point, we set a maximum millage, meaning that you can go lower, but you cannot go higher after that meeting. Okay? These days may seem awkward, but we have a process to follow, for TRIM process, truth in millage. It gives us, from beginning to end of the budget, it gives us a certain amount of days that we have to complete a budget. And towards the end, we have to complete certain requirements for the property appraiser himself to be able to send all the TRIM notices out to the citizens that own residences in Manatee County. Our deadline to provide this information is August the 4th to the property appraiser or before, so that he can in turn do his work and all that and send out the TRIM notices. TRIM notices are very important to us, not only because it informs the citizens what their proposed millage and property taxes are going to be, but also because it's the first it is the first advertised public hearing. It leads us to the first advertised public hearing of September. Right now, you see there's no date in September. I have to wait until the school board establishes their public hearing date, and then I have to follow. Then Manatee County has to follow. Okay, so until I get that information, I don't get that until probably mid-April. So when I said that, then I will change my dates and you will know. I have to be done no later than usually like the second week of September. And this is just because of the number of days that I have as per trim to finish my process. At that point, we will adopt tentative millage, and then on the second public hearing, we will adopt a full budget. On the first public hearing, I'll bring the budget for the port included with our budget as a blended component. Okay? And at that time, then we are just adopted. One more year. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any questions from the commissioners from Madam CFO? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for your presentation today, and thank you
Thank
for the
you
whole,
for your time.
your whole team. You guys do a great job, so looking forward to everything coming forward. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm going to right now. We also have to open up for public comment. Are there any citizens here that would like to give public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Anything else, Madam?
No, sir.
Thank
I want to
you very
thank you
much.
for your time.
We'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
I looked at